The Depth to Delve Deep by Rote Writer. Chapter 7 Settling In. The owners obviously spend a lot of time and effort making the inn beautiful and rustic. Rote soon finds out how much so when he walks in through the inn's bar room. He glances at the wonderful stone fireplace forming the entire wall with stones jutting at just the right juxtaposes. He is led to the family manor behind the inn. The innkeepers and some of their children present warmly welcome him. Well, you're welcome to work here. So says the husband who shares ownership of the inn with his wife. After a cup of tea and some talk, Rote's introduced to his summoned new roommate. He stands there shocked at the sudden changes in store with his accommodations. With chagrin, he shakes Rote's hand, totally taken aback by the sudden intrusion into his caravan. When Rote hears the word caravan, his mind thinks of the circus. It must mean a trailer. Meanwhile, this fellow is fallen by the abrupt announcement of the inn's new start. Rote learns the new start is a new employee. Rote knows right away that although the family running the inn warmly welcome him, the contrary is certain upon meeting his new roommate. It sure seems so as he begrudgingly leads the new start to the caravan. He's an Englishman up in Scotland, who by all accounts has an incredible travel record around the world. Scattered around the caravan like a disheveled library are remnants of Rote's roommate's past exploits. He has a collection of Lonely Planet guidebooks. Rote's quite familiar with these thorough and guided by experience books. He immediately goes for the one on Scotland, saying as how it's his first time stationed in a foreign country. With that common interest, Rote goes out of his way to use the shared love of travel to break the ice and ease into his new environment. Not to be. Nonetheless, the first couple of days and nights, Rote familiarizes with the family run in. The inn is lovely and made lovelier with the family and their many children coming and going. It's impossible to even know if he's met every one of them. And in truth, he hasn't. The young ones are always around at supper time, always amiable with their accentuated by accents antics. It makes for good cheer at tea time, another term like high tea he notes for supper. They all eat in the pub much to the chagrin of the chef. He has a heavy Scottish brogue. He believes the family should cook their own meals in their own house instead of bother him every night with their more often than not bothersome orders, befitting the Laird's old man are. Meanwhile, the staff will eat stovies. Rote's enticed to see how the Scots stack their shepherd's pie like a three-tiered turret. Mash, haggis, and vegetables. Good. Rote really likes the chef. He's a true blue Scotsman from Dundee or Aberdeen. Rote's not sure. Chef has two people helping him with the cooking. One of the sons and a fellow who's been at the inn for a couple of years. He's straight from South Africa with a few stories to tell. All telling a beautiful family garnished by a good staff sit for supper or tea each night in the pub. After tea, some of the staff will stay at the bar and have a few pints chatting about this and that. It's at these bar-side chats, charmed by the fireside warmth, where Rote makes an effort to get to know his roommate. He has quite the collection of conquered countries, a true globetrotter. One of the first nights sitting in the pub alongside the chef and the cook, while some of the children come and go like whirlwinds, Rote asks his roommate, "What drove you to travel the whole wide world?" The response kind of gives Rote a chuckle. The Englishman, bluntly and stoutly, as a true blue Brit, says, "To make the world English." Rote reflects on the response and finds it to be both comical and concise in regards to Britain's bulwark abroad. Many of Britain's offshoots abroad are now filling in the void. The conversation continues. Rote, like a roving rookie in respect to traveling abroad, bemuses the British fellow with constant inquiries into each country conquered. He calls into question the customs found in the parts of the world his roommate reaches. Rote's truly intrigued by the fellow's foreign flights. Unfortunately, the apprentice-master relationship, though well-intended, is short-lived. Rote inadvertently put his pal on a pedestal, and by this his roommate grooms delusions of grandeur. He believes the British way is the only way. They may hold sway still. English, after all, is the language to be learned all over the world. Apart from that, Rote thinks their boorish behavior is seen poorly. Meanwhile, as the first few nights are spent conversing with the crew in the inn's pub. The first couple of days are spent outside, regardless of the rain running rampant. Rote walks around the area, totally taken by the tapestry of all the tall tales told of old Scotland. After all, this is where the famous freebooter Rob Roy roams and releases his clan's gathering call. Agregalash! Agregalash! Rote pictures a gathering of the clans, generations of gallivanting gillies, in the glens over Ben Lomond to Loch Lomond, Craig Royston and Inversnaid coming together. A gathering Rob Roy rustles with his real name, Robert MacGregor, and his much-to-do hullabaloo mantra, Royal's my race, and by bagpipe, my race is royal. The keepers of the inn, after hearing Rote's recanting of their history, let him know that if he's a fan of Rob Roy, then he's in the right place. They know how taken with all things Scottish he is. Though all told, his hold on their history is based on a few of his favorite movies, like Rob Roy and Braveheart. They explain to him the very estate of the Marquis of Montrose, depicted in one of the films favored Rob Roy, is a country stroll down the road from where the inn stands. It still stays the direct descendant of the Duke. Rote returns to reality and relearns a lot about the area through his frequent conversations with the innkeepers, their children, the staff, and the clientele at the pub, and by ritually reading his biblical guidebook, The Lonely Planet. He learns how the location of the inn on the bonny banks of Loch Lomond centers on the crux of a geographical line known as the Highland Line, the great divide determining the lowlands from the highlands. This land is where his two favorite folk heroes, Rob Roy and William Wallace, rove like rogues. Rote like a rogue roves along the loch. He sees sheep just about everywhere he looks. He figures forests once filled with flora and fauna exist before all the green rolling hills. There are clumps and clusters of trees still. He cuts through a thicket along the loch and is in one of them. There is a tree that sticks out from the others. It's a solitary holly tree, with teething thorn-like leaves that never leave. They are always green. He always touches its trunk as if to confer conscience, softly and silently in passing, on his way up to the Craigie Fort. The Craigie Fort is on an old hold atop a hill. It sits on a scar ridge overlooking Loch Lomond. Rote finds the faint former foundations. He belts out, "Freedom!" Before ever coming to Scotland, Rote makes that word his word, the word to end all words. Freedom is the very last cry of William Wallace in the movie Braveheart. It's Rote's reason for choosing Scotland. He will wield it just like a clan call, for his heart is as brave as a Wallace, a Walsh. He feels for words and for the freedom formulating from the very foundations of his being. Like an unearthly undulation, he howls out the word, "Freedom!" There alone on top of the Craigie Fort, Rote sure William Wallace is a friend to Rob Roy's Alpine clan of the MacGregors in his time. He must have hiked hundreds of times this way during his day, way back when he's the Wallace, the fierce freedom fighter who fights for Scotland at the turn of the 13th century. He's bravely brought to life in the movie Braveheart as a poet warrior. Aye, everywhere Rote hikes, he endears yesteryear. Everything seems so mystical, and magical. Even menial markings sway his way. How glorious the stone dikes line the loch. Lanes and the pastures so softly covered in green moss. He sees the green grazing grounds of Highland sheep and cattle. They look a lot different than the ones he's accustomed to. They don't seem to mind the rain. One thing Rote knows since he's been up in Scotland is that it rains relentlessly and endlessly. Without proper rain gear, Rote finds himself getting wetter and wetter. Actually, once wet, he only remains so. Oh no, he actually gets wetter and wetter, like a sopping sponge. Rote finds out in Scotland during the winter months how possible it is to progress from dry to drenched, soaked to saturated, to the point of pruning in a moment with some of the downpours. After a couple of days of touring the area, Rote, like a wet waif, wants to see more of his surroundings. He makes plans to do so. The owners are in no rush to get Rote rendered by the routine of work. They allow him the time to get comfortable with the environment, the surroundings, and sort of ease into it.